It's my great pleasure today to introduce Dr. Sue Lowery, who will be the speaker at the 4th Annual Davies Lecture in Teaching Excellence in the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of San Diego. Dr. Lowery received her bachelor's degree from Mississippi State University in zoology and then completed her doctoral studies at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UCSD. She was a recipient of an NSF predoctoral fellowship and a National Research Council postdoctoral fellowship and came to USD as a faculty member in the biology department in 1990. She's a comparative biologist who teaches prep courses for biology majors and upper division classes in biological oceanography and has participated in the interdisciplinary honors program, teaching several team-taught honors classes. Dr. Lowery mentors undergraduate research students and is interested in promoting science to young women and girls in middle school to consider science as a potential career by her involvement in the Expanding Your Horizons program. Dr. Lowery also received the Outstanding Preceptor Award in 2007, and most important for us tonight, she was a recipient of the Davies Award for Teaching Excellence in 2006. Today she will speak on the sustainable student, fostering habits of enduring learning in USD students.
Thank you. Well, given the title and that I'm from the biology department, you might have been expecting a sustainability lecture. So what I am going to be talking about sustainability, but not in the normal sort of sense that we usually hear of it today, except maybe once in a while. But what I am interested in talking about is how we can sustain learning in the students in our core curriculum, in our majors, and how we can hopefully propel them onto a path where they'll continue to exercise learning throughout their lifetime and using some of the skills that they pick up while they're with us. And so that'll be the focus of what I'm talking about today. It's really an honor to be here today and look out in the audience and see all of the people that are here. It certainly is an opportunity to preach to the choir. So, you know, if you want to stop me at some point and say, heard it, done it, let's move on to something else, feel free to do that. And thank you for all of your working with you here over all the years, and as I've developed my pedagogy, it's been wonderful to discuss things with other people and to enjoy those discussions and participation always. So it's our 60th anniversary, so I thought I'd show you a little bit of a picture of where we've been. And this is science at USD 60 years ago, and as you could see, the students were quite engaged in learning. And our mission for learning hasn't faltered in the 60 years since then. So today we have slightly different facilities and slightly different equipment that we're using here and there, but the commitment to learning is still there. And all of you in this room are certainly committed to learning, and you'll probably have a great appreciation for the sort of things that I know that you're fostering and that I try to foster myself when I'm doing this. For all of us, the life of scholarship and the teaching profession is a calling that hooked us long ago. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background about what hooked me, or one of those moments when I knew I was hooked. And then throughout the talk, I'm going to be talking about some of the things that I think sustain me as a student, and then hopefully that can inform my teaching and some other things that I think are going on at USD that are really exciting when we look at our teaching and our pedagogy. One of those moments, and of course we all have many of those moments, when I knew that I was destined for a life of the academy. I was in Mississippi, summer class. I was on the deck of a converted shrimp trawler that we were out covered with mud and fish guts and all this sort of slime and things. And not the deck, we'd clean that up, but that would be me. And you know, the TA, and there was a downpour that was starting, as only a downpour in Mississippi can be. And only the TA and I were out on the deck. Everybody else had taken refuge in the wheelhouse. And we were out there looking at each other and realizing what fools we are and how thrilled we were to be out there. And after commenting on what our mothers might have thought of us, she and I realized that we were hooked for a lifelong pathway that was going to take us into many, many, many days of, oh, you know, tedium, fish blood, various and sundry hardships, and then also the joys and the wonderful life of discovery. And so that's what I hope to share with my students when I'm working with them, and I know that that's the thing that you're sharing with them too. And whether your revelation came in a dirty place like that, or whether you were with dusty manuscripts in a library, or you know, with some fabulous NMR spectrum, or the most wonderful musical score that you've ever experienced, I know that all of you had something like that, and it's something that you try to bring to the classroom in order to excite the students and get them thinking about that. So while I consider my scientific scholarship to be something that keeps me a perpetual student, I also think that the scholarship of approaching teaching is one of those things that keeps you a perpetual student. And when I came to USD, I think the thing that attracted me most to USD compared to other places that I was interviewing and offered jobs was that I could feel that there was a collaboration here, that people really cared about teaching, and that they cared about it enough so that they would put aside perhaps quarrels over, you know, resources and things like that, and they could really come together about what was best for the students. And that was appealing then. I didn't quite know why it was appealing, since I'd actually never taught a class before, being at a research university. But I had this vague feeling that it was important, and it was better than the other places that I had been. And so I'm happy to say that several years later, that I still know that that was the thing to do, and that I'm really happy that I had that inclination and that I went with my gut reaction versus perhaps other things that would have been more of a career-building sort of approach with a plan. So no matter what I think about scholarship, and no matter what you think about scholarship, we know that the students have a different view of what their goal is. And I'm going to paraphrase Derek Bach, who's the former president of Harvard and has written a lot about the university and how it's serving its students and stuff. And he says that the professorate has an appreciation and a desire for knowledge for its own sake. But from the student's perspective, and also from their employer's perspective, that they're really thinking about college as a career-building exercise, that a place where they're going to acquire skills that are going to make them more marketable, or they're going to help their life or something like that. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how do we look for the intersection between those goals. The goals that I have for understanding knowledge and for always acquiring knowledge and considering things throughout your life. And then the goals that the students have for skills that they can use in order to pay off their college tuition. My dad said to me when I talked to him about possibly becoming a college professor, he looked at me and said, well, how much do they make? And of course, since I was in Mississippi, it was a pretty paltry sum. And so I told him what it was, and he's like, honey, couldn't you be happy doing something that paid a little better? So apparently not. Sorry, Dad. So, oops, very short fuse on this thing. So as we think about how can we intersect these goals and what can we look for that would put these pieces together, I think that one of the things that's interesting is that our modern culture, where we're drowning in data, that you've got facts at your very fingertips, false ones, good ones, irrelevant ones, and you could get millions of them within less than a second. I think that that's a time when it actually makes it much easier for us to think about what is the value of our education. It should empower us to focus on those things that underlie the acquisition of knowledge, where you're looking at methods of inquiry, critical analysis. How do you look at opposing views and evaluate them? And how do you apply them for something that you've never seen before? Because frankly, that's where you use most of these things. Once you leave college, and with the skills that we're trying to develop in the students, those are really the most important. If you look at several national organizations, some of the trends that we see over the last few years, the American Association for the Advancement of Science had Project 2061. This has been a long-going project where they've been trying to look for how do we prepare students for science for all Americans. And some of the things that they've recommended is to prune the curriculum. And so they've said that we focus on too many things, that the United States education is a mile wide and inch deep, or to put it in scientific terms, I suppose that would be kilometers wide and centimeters deep. But basically that we're trying to cover too much, that there's too much interesting out there, too many interesting things out there, and we really have a hard time giving up any of them to focus on some of those underlying things that are preparing the students for acquiring that new knowledge and for how they're going to replace these or deal with the amount of knowledge. So they've been talking about pruning the curriculum and providing benchmarks and learning goals, primarily focused on the K through 12 system to prepare those students and to improve the science education there. But it's also working now in the college system as well to apply some of the things that they've learned from the pedagogical studies to the college setting. Project Kaleidoscope is a national organization that's been focused on science education and its reform. And they do all kinds of wonderful events where they bring people together and they do workshops. And one of the focal areas that they have is engagement. How do we engage students? And how do we make the courses more engaging and more active so that the students are participating and that they're not sitting in a lecture with hundreds of students? Well, of course, USD is lucky in that we have very few classes that are large. And we use a lot of the techniques that large universities try to employ. So I think that the liberal arts universities have been leaders in this setting, and now it's been tried to be applied across a wider system. So long after that beautiful PowerPoint is forgotten that you spent so much time on, and long after they have sold the 1,000-page textbook for a pittance, you want to know what is it that students need to know. So after taking one of my introductory biology classes, will the students have some tools for evaluating all the conflicting information that they get where they have an important medical decision to make, or if they have to vote on something with environmental policy? Have I given them some tools that they can use to approach that problem? A student who graduates from USD and their employer sends them to Bangalore, has our liberal arts curriculum prepared them so that they can move to a new country, so that they can think about the cultural sensitivities that they need to use. They're living in an environment where the predominant religion is quite different from the one that they grew up with. Will they know, or at least know how to address some of the historical issues that might affect their interactions with people that they're working with or the people that they meet on the street? So those are the kind of things that I want to talk about today, and I think that they're the kind of things that are really exciting to talk about. Some of the people that have done research in this area have determined these things as enduring learning or enduring understandings. And some of the ways that they've approached this is to think about what are the big ideas at the core of your discipline. You know, all of our disciplines are filled with lots of interesting things, and many of us spend our time in particular little wonderful eddies with all kinds of information, and we love to give those to the students. But what we really want to think about in some of these classes is what are the big ideas? What are the central paradigms of our particular disciplines? How do people acquire knowledge in our particular discipline? And what are the assumptions that we use when we acquire that knowledge? So they have proposed that we should look at the curriculum and change it so that we're taking those ideas and skills that are related to understanding the big ideas, the ones that have value beyond the classroom, the one that the students can apply once they leave and long after the test is finished, the ones that inform their decision making once they've graduated. And so the ideas that are proposed to be the ones that will be carried with the students throughout their life are those large, broad intellectual focus, that they might motivate and engage the students so that they would be more interested in learning the things that we're presenting. And particularly Wiggins and McTeague have looked at this enduring learning and said, once you've established what these goals are, or what are the big ideas in your discipline, is that then you should backwards design your curriculum. Rather than the approach that we often take is, you know, looking at the available textbooks and picking the one that most closely fits the way that we want to teach the class, and then sort of following along with it because it's easier for the students. They would propose that we approach it in an entirely different way. Once we've established what these big ideas are, we would think about what kinds of exercises and activities would promote the grasping of those ideas, and that we would make them the central focus of all of the teaching that we do, and somehow make the entire course, and then ultimately the entire curriculum, connected so that we show the students what the connections are between these various places. So all of us, in some ways or another, are engaged in this kind of thing. And with some prodding from our accrediting institution, we are now in a very vigorous debate about what are some of these big ideas. And so we are in the process of trying to determine for USD What are the big ideas that we want USD students to know? What are the big ideas that we want a biology student to know? What are the big ideas that we want a history student to know? And then how does our curriculum fit with achieving those goals? And so it's really pretty exciting. You may not think so in your various departments as you're struggling to fill out those reports. But I still hear it here and there. And as Joe Colombo has spoken of it, it's sort of like the processes of grief, you know, that you go through the various stages and that you end up with acceptance that you're going to have to evaluate your courses. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, I actually learned a lot. And so I think that that's the part that's exciting to me, is to see so many people engaged in thinking about what they're doing and putting into practice then what they're learning from this incredible focus on what are our students learning and how can we better serve that particular focus. Now, I think that student engagement at USD is one of those things that we can see it everywhere. We look around, we can see that students are working with faculty members in a research setting. They're doing internships in outside companies or in outside settings. They're doing a lot of community service learning. And so we see students that are studying abroad. We have a huge number of the students there. We see students that are engaged in active and real research. We have a tremendous amount of volunteering. And when you look at the amount of volunteer efforts that our students report compared to the national average, it's one of the areas that we really seem to excel. And I think that it has a very positive impact on their learning, and then also has a very important impact on that holistic education that we are so interested in giving to the students, or participating in with the students. Our preceptorial program is one of the places where the students have the opportunity to form bonds with their professors. These are from a senior party, so we were... But you form bonds with these students, and with many of the students, I know that we have lifelong connections, so that we are talking with them as they're going on into their graduate programs or into other areas. You get to meet their children. You get to really form a bond with them. And one of the other areas that we have an opportunity to really affect the depth of their learning is to interact with them not only in this preceptorial setting, but also in a more informal setting, and then also in an academic setting. So we see that there's lots of evidence that people at USD are doing this. This was the 200th birthday for Darwin. So this was a fun thing, but also we were able to highlight a really important big idea in biology and in science in general. And we've had lots of other things like this. Creative collaborations has grown tremendously. And if you go to creative collaborations and you look at the diversity and the range of the things that the students are doing, I think it's a real testament to the dedication that USD professors have to engaging the students in a really deep way. And so that's a wonderful evidence of what we're doing with this enduring learning. I'm not used to using notes, excuse me. When I think back about all of these things that I want for the students, I know that they echo things that have been important to me. I've now been a student for, at least half a century. And I'm planning to remain in that mode until my final matriculation. And so one of the things that prepares me for this is, again, I mentioned this sort of joy and discovery. And I really don't have to have a purpose for some of the learning. And not everybody shares that, but that's one of the things that's important to me. The interactive nature of learning. And again, that's one of the things that we're trying to promote in these engaged learning, is working in groups, working in active discussions, working in projects so that the students are going beyond sitting in the classroom, memorizing for the test, doing a good job, but then closing the books and putting it behind them. We're engaged in a process of trying to show them that it's an ongoing process when you acquire knowledge. It's an ongoing process when you enter into education. It's not this defined stage in your youth where you receive the diploma and then you're done and you can get on with the rest of your life. That's the real life. It's like, this is the real life. You're going to spend the rest of your life learning things, whether it's in an academic setting or if it's in another setting. The lessons that we learn here are ones that we want to apply. Now, I think that one of the things that we probably don't do enough of, at least I know I don't, and I've tried to start, is identifying for the student what are these enduring learnings. What is the takeaway message from this particular class? What is the core curriculum about? What are we hoping that you will get out of these classes? And so trying to reinforce what that is. Now, I think often we're so focused on the mission of our class as a class that we sometimes forget how it fits into the larger framework. So, I'm so focused in my introductory biology class about presenting them with the baseline from which they can grow as a biology member, or a baseline of the big ideas in biology. So if they choose after taking my class, which of course many of them do, to go into a different field, that they've gotten the big ideas of evolution, they've gotten the big ideas of ecology, they've gotten the big ideas of genetics, and then they can move on with what they're doing. But sometimes we forget, I think, to tell them that the skills and the knowledge that they're acquiring are things that they can use in a very different setting, and that they don't realize how important it is. And I think that that's something that we should probably really promote. Maybe we could transform those moments that we've all heard. This is too much work for a GE class. Anybody heard that? Yeah, maybe a little bit. It's like, oh, it's only a GE class. Why are you making me read all these materials? Why do I have to write a paper? And maybe that would be transformed into the things that you hear here and there, is I'll never look at that issue in the same way again. I have the tools to think about how the politicians are manipulating the media. I have the tools to think about how can I learn about this. I have the tools to think about, is the vaccine itself really more dangerous than the thing that it's preventing me from catching? And I can apply those in a new setting. And so I think that we need to do that. We need to show the students that that's it. And those aha moments are one of those reasons that sustain me as a student and sustain me as an instructor. Now, what do we know nationally about how students feel about this? And so these are some more students engaged in some hopefully enduring learning. This is a cruise that we take. It's highly interdisciplinary. And that's one of the things that really promotes enduring learning, is to think about how does this material relate to other materials. And many of the forefronts of science, for certain, and I know in other disciplines, it's that seam between different disciplines where most of the exciting research is going on. It's the frontier where our students will make their mark. And I think that everything that we can do to show them that what you do here has a connection over here, that what you learn in this class has a connection over there, that the most exciting thing that you can do is to think about how they all fit together, and then to look out in the world and think about how they fit together there. Well, whether they want to or not, when they go on this cruise, we force them to think about it, because we do geology, we do physical oceanography, we do some chemistry, and we collect organisms. And then we make them spend the rest of the semester working up the data. And so it's an opportunity for students in multiple classes to participate in building knowledge and to sharing the information that they're discovering, and to think about how the problem that we want to address transcends the classes that they happen to be taking at the moment. And so hopefully it gets them into thinking about that, so that you're not leaving the chemistry behind when you start to take the biology class, or you're not leaving behind the literature when you start to look at history, that there's a connection between them. And again, I think that by using real-life examples as a way to focus the activities that we have in the class, that it's a very engaging way to address student issues, things that they'll learn. You can show them how they'll apply them once they're out of school. And then also it gives them a feeling of empowerment, because they're actually working on something that gives benefit back to the community or provides actual benefit to their particular discipline. These students are measuring trees and working on a reforestation project in the Cuyamacas, where, as you can see, all the trees were burned. All of these experiences deepen what the students take away and make it much more likely that the things that they learn in class will stick with them for the rest of their lives. So how can we engage with the students? Are we pushing them too hard if we ask them to do all of these things? Are we pushing them too hard if we ask them to synthesize, to critically think? Well, actually, when you do surveys, you find that that's not the case. If you look at freshman expectations for student engagement in college, and this is from one of our recent participations in a national survey called NSSE, National Survey of Student Engagement. And I'm focusing a little bit here, and I'm going to show you a few data that I pulled out of the report. Students expect to be more challenged in college. And when you compare what they expect with what they actually report during their freshman year, it falls off. So they're not working as hard as they expected to. So no matter that they're complaining more than you would like to hear, they're actually not working as hard as they expected. So I think that we have a little bit of room here to engage the students in a different way, in a way that's more meaningful. And it actually, I think, would meet their expectations, and I think it would contribute to a better appreciation of the college experience. Now, surprisingly, even though we have the small class sizes, we have these dedicated faculty members, and everybody in this room, I think, has been a preceptor. All these people that are really engaged with working with the students, we still see that our numbers in these freshman surveys don't really differ that much from what we see in the national average. So it's not particularly a failing of USD. It's something where students expect to work harder in all universities, and all universities need to step up to the plate. Crack that whip. But interestingly enough, for many of these measures, if you look at the senior version of these surveys, the seniors are much more engaged. Now, you might think, well, naturally, they've chosen a major. They've found the area of study that engages them. They've found the thing that they like to do, and so now they're willing to spend more work on it. That could be part of it. And I don't think that we can discount that as students start to self-select into areas that have much more relevance to them, that that's going to be the case. But I think that we also want to think about whether or not maybe we teach the classes in a different way. That the majors classes that resonate so closely with the topics that we are most interested in, the areas where we have the most expertise and we can design these real-life experiences, where we can design these active learning things, maybe we're spending more time doing those at the upper division than we are at the lower division. I don't know if that's the case or not. I think it's just one of those things where we as a faculty need to think about this and to look at what we're seeing and to consider that. If you look a little bit more at the NSSE data, and again, like I said, 30% expected to spend more than 20 hours a week preparing for class. And when they actually got here, it fell off a little bit. But the most telling part is look at the number that actually spent less than 10 hours a week. And so that increased quite a bit. So I think that those students out there that are working really hard, many of them aren't changing. But in that large middle group of students who would be willing to work a little bit harder, between 10 and 20 hours a week, we're losing them. And so I think that we want to think about how we can engage them. And then also we see that they expected to participate more in class. But I know I've had the experience of looking out in the class, and they may expect to participate, but it's sometimes hard to engage them in participation until they get older. And then they're much more free about that. So I think that we need to look at ways that we can engage these freshmen and sophomores. And maybe it's telling us something about our core curriculum classes. Did you discuss the ideas with a teacher outside? And we see that the never group increases rather dramatically. And that this, we do see that the seniors are much more likely to report that they have engaged with a faculty member outside. So I think that that's another area where we want to improve our engagement with the students, that we really are. And USD really pushes how welcoming we are. And yet the students still aren't taking advantage of it. So if we can think of creative ways to deal with that, I think it's important. Now, I also found another statistic, and I think that this may give us a little bit of insight into some areas where we need to improve. If you look at the core curriculum classes, which are most of the classes that the freshmen and the sophomores are taking, we have about 37% of those that are taught by full-time faculty. The full-time faculty we know are highly engaged in pedagogy. They're going to workshops. They're thinking about what their departmental mission is. They're thinking about what is the mission of the university. And it could be that those are the classes where the students, as freshmen, are highly engaged. We have 57% approximately of our core curriculum classes are taught by adjuncts. Now, I'm not proposing that the adjuncts aren't doing a good job. I'm just saying that they probably aren't as engaged in the discussion that we all share about pedagogy. They're not as engaged in the discussion that we have about enduring learning. And so I think that one of the things that if we refocus the curriculum, so we're thinking about the big ideas, if we refocus curriculum so we're thinking about enduring learning, not only may it excite some of us who are teaching within the majors so that we may expand our teaching offerings and we start to teach more in the core curriculum, but I think that it also gives us an area where we can help our adjuncts to adopt the modes of teaching that we prefer at USD, to provide training for them and to provide them with more in-depth association with what we're trying to do with our core curriculum, and to provide them with more information about what we expect them to interact with the students. And perhaps we can also think about ways that we can get more interaction between those faculty members and the students, or how we can pick up the slack, since these people often aren't on campus a lot. Okay. So going back to the big ideas, I am a biologist. I am thinking about sustainability. I do think about biodiversity. And I think those are perfect topics that make for some great big ideas that could really engage with students. I recently read Paul Hawken's commencement address at the University of Portland. Now, usually commencement addresses are not the most inspiring of speeches, even though people are trying very hard. And this is one of the most inspiring ones that I ever read. He's an economist who's very interested in sustainability, and he was one of the early people to be pushing how businesses could be more environmentally friendly. And so one of the things that he said to the students, he says, if you look on the back of your diploma, written in invisible ink, and he says, I'm going to tell you what's there because you probably can't see it. It says, you're brilliant and the earth is hiring. So we're in an economy where people are thinking about ways to do things differently. And so I think that it might provide some of those big ideas, and it would be really great to see if we could think about how we could link together groups of classes to think about how would you apply the information that you're learning in this particular class to some big world, real world problem. And I think that this would be a sort of a galvanizing approach for the students. It would excite them because it's something that they hear about a lot. It's actually a big problem, and possibly even an area where they can make their mark as they go out on their careers. And I think it might be a wonderful way to hook them into thinking about how do I deepen my experience while I'm at USD, and then how do I deepen this experience and carry it with me throughout my life. So if any of you are out there and want to think about doing some team teaching or something like that, where we're linking together science and economics and social studies and history, I think that this would be one of the big world questions that would provide a great place to foster some of this learning and give it to the students. So thank you so much for all of your meaningful conversations and for coming tonight. And it's been a pleasure working with you, and it's a pleasure working with the students too. Thank you.